Hey peeps, it's Aldo from Zero to Mastery, and in today's tutorial we're diving into Go variables. Now this isn't just any tutorial, it's part of Jayson Lennon's complete Go programming bootcamp course available on Zero to Mastery. So if you want to master Go, click the link in the top right hand corner or check out the description below for the full course. Alright, that's it from me. Let me hand it over to Jayson. Enjoy!
In this video, I'll be talking about variables. I'll be discussing what variables are, how to create them, the comma OK idiom, and naming and constants. So let's talk about what variables are first. Variables provide a way to store and access data in your program. The data within a variable can be anything, and it can vary, which is where it gets the name variable. Variables are simply an alias to some data in memory, and it makes it easier to access that data. When you store data into a variable, it's called assignment. So you'll be assigning data into variables. Variables have multiple components. We have the name of the variable, the data that's part of the variable or lack thereof, and a data type. There's multiple ways to create variables, and in this example, we'll just be creating a single variable. So we'll use the var keyword to create a variable. We'll give it a name. This one is named example. We'll use the equal symbol to assign a value, and in this example, we're assigning 3. So the number 3 will be assigned to the example variable. We can also use type annotations, as in this example. So we're creating the same variable, and we're giving it the int data type. And again, we're assigning it 3. In this second example, since we're using a type annotation of integer, if we try to assign a string, such as hi, then we'll get a compiler error because hi is a string and it's not an integer. In this third one, we're creating a variable named example and we're setting the data type to int. However, we're not assigning any value initially. So this will be considered an uninitialized variable and it'll get a default value if we fail to assign to it. In this case, we are assigning to it. So in the second line, we have example equals 3. So we're assigning 3 to the example variable. And again, if you forget this line, then this will be equal to 0, which is the default for an integer. We can also create multiple variables at the same time. So here we're creating variables a, b, and c, and they're separated by commas. We have our assignment equal sign, and then we're assigning these to 1, 2, and the string sample. So a will be a 1, b will be a 2, and c will have the string sample. This way of creating variables makes it really simple to assign multiple different data types to multiple variables. We can also create multiple variables using a block. So if we have the var keyword and parentheses, everything within this block will be created as a variable. So we'll create an a, it'll be an integer, and we'll set it to 1. We'll create the variable b, also an integer, we'll set it to 2. We'll create the variable c and assign it to sample. We didn't include a type annotation here, and that's because the compiler uses type inference. So it will see that we're working with a string because we have double quotes, and it will assign a string type to C. Down here, after this block, we'll be able to use A, B, and C as individual variables, as if we had created them one line at a time. We also have a create and assign shortcut. This is done by having the name of the variable, and then we have a colon equals, and then the value. So this is what you'll commonly see in Go code because it's shorter and easier to write, and you get type inference as well. So this example variable will have the value 3 assigned to it because we're using the create and assign operator. We can use the create and assign operator with multiple variables as well. So we have A and B. A will be 1 and B will be the string sample. Here's a little bit more information about variables. Variables can be reassigned and assigned to other variables. So here we're creating variable A and we're assigning it the value of 1. Later on in the program, we can then reassign 2 to the value of A. Then we can also assign 3 to the value of A. Remember that this is the create and assign. And since A has been created right here, we no longer need to create it again down here. So we can just use equal to assign it. Over here on the right, we have A equal to 1. We then create a new variable B, and we assign it to the value of A. So B will be 1 because 1 is inside A, and since 1 is in A, 1 will now be in B. And we can also use the var keyword to create the variable C and just assign it to B, which will also be 1. Whenever you do this, we're creating a copy. So even though we have an A, if we were to change later this A into a 2, for example, B will still be equal to 1 because we just copied the data that was in A. When we created this variable, it's just a copy of A. We're putting that copy into B. The same thing goes for C down here. So when we do create a new variable C and assign it to a copy of B. Variable names can only be used once per scope. What this means is here, we're creating a variable A, assign it to the value of 1. Later on, we try to create variable A again using the var keyword and assign it to 5. This won't work. So that's going to be a compiler error because it's already been created one time. In this case, we would need to just drop the var keyword and have A equal to 5. Variables that are declared but not assigned will automatically have a default value. So whenever you create a variable, such as this name variable as a string, it's going to have a default value because we haven't assigned anything yet. So there's no equal here, so we have no value. What this means is we'll get a default. And so for string, the default is an empty string. So you'll just have, it's the same as doing double quotes. There'll be no bytes within the string and it'll just be empty. For numbers, the default is 0. And for everything else, the default is nil. Nil is equivalent to null in other programming languages, meaning there's an absence of a value. So there's no value whenever we have a nil value. We also have the comma OK idiom, which is a special case that allows us to reuse create and assign operators. So as we saw earlier, we have an A, we're creating and assigning 1, we then try to create A again and assign it to 5. So this will be an error because we already created A one time, so we can't create it again. In the middle here, we have A comma B. So we're creating two variables, create and assign. We'll assign 1 to A and we'll assign 2 to B. Later on in the program, we can do C comma B, create and assign, and we'll assign 3 to C and then 4 to B. Even though we created B right here, since we're using the comma OK idiom, we're allowed to reassign B again, even though we have the create and assign operator. So the reason we have this special case is because lots of code might give you errors. And when that happens, we'll have the variable assign and possible error values, and we'll need to check for those errors, which we'll be doing later. But when we use the create and assign, it allows us to easily create this new variable while still reusing our error values. If we weren't allowed to do this, we'd have to have like error 1, error 2, error 3, and it's much easier to keep reusing the same error variable since it's going to contain the same type of information, which is just error information. Naming variables in Go has a convention, and we use camel case. Camel case always starts with a lowercase letter, and each word has an uppercase letter to denote where the word begins. So we have my long variable name. So the L, V, and N are all capitalized, and the M is lowercase. Whenever you're coming up with variable names, it's good to have something that's descriptive for what's going on. So here's an example of a good variable name. We have total guests is equal to 12. And here's a bad one. We have TTL, which is equal to 12. So TTL might be short for total or time to live. And even if it is total, we still don't know what the total is about. So to make your code easier to follow, it's always good to use descriptive variable names. Also, these are code comments. So double slashes is a code comment, which are ignored by the compiler and just allow you to leave notes for yourself and other developers. We also have constants, which are created using the const keyword. They're useful when you're declaring some value that needs to be utilized throughout some or all of the program. And in contrast to variables, constants never change. So once you assign them, you cannot reassign them. Here's some examples of some constants. We have a max speed set to 30. We have minimum purchase price set to $7.50. And we have application author is equal to Bob. Notice that we don't need to use a colon here. We can just assign it directly. And the naming convention for constants is a capital letter for each word. So in C, usually these would be all caps, but in Go, we prefer to just start it with a capital letter. Let's recap. Variables are a way to access memory locations using an alias. There are multiple ways to create variables. We can create variables on their own. We can make compound assignments. We can create variables using blocks. There's also the create and assign operator. Variables can be assigned to other variables, and variable names can only be used once per scope. This means once you create a variable, you're unable to create another variable of the same name. Variables that are declared but not assigned to will have a default value, and the default value for numbers is 0, and for strings is just an empty string. The "OK" idiom allows you to reuse the second variable when you're creating a compound variable assignment. And "OK" is frequently used when you're checking for errors.
And there you have it, folks. A big shout out to Jayson for guiding us through this tutorial. If this lesson sparked your interest, there's a whole lot more to learn in his complete Go Programming Bootcamp course, which you probably already know where to find, linked in the top right hand corner and in the description down below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on future tutorials from Jayson and other expert Zero to Mastery instructors. That's it from me. Keep coding, keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next video.